Children are one of the most valuable commodities in Christianity. Except they're not commodities. They're people. And we love and treasure them. And that's a myth that I hope never gets busted. We start a brand new series of sermons today. It'll last through this month and August. Mythbusters. You've seen the television show? I had some folks come to the 9:30 service who said, we came because we love the TV show. I kind of thought maybe they would like what I had to say. And they said, have you seen this episode or that episode? They knew all the episodes of Mythbusters by heart. I thought, wow, we ought to learn Matthew and Luke like that. But it was great. Mythbusters, Jamie and Adam, they just love this stuff. I mean, they test all these myths. Now, by myths, you know, it's things we all know, whether they're true or not. A myth is not necessarily false. A myth may be true. Jamie and Adam love to test these things. So they'll look at stuff like the 7-second rule. Have you heard the 7-second rule? You drop something on the floor and you pick it up within 7 seconds, it's okay to eat it. That would be some of the stuff Jamie and Alan do. Yeah. How about the eye black on baseball players' eyes? The black that goes under here? Does it cut down the glare of the lights? And if it works, should you wear eye black to church so that the glare of the lights are less? Next week, I got to come with, well, never mind. How about the driving a car with the windows down instead of the air conditioner on? Do you get better gas mileage? Yeah. And then every 12-year-old boy's favorite episode of Mythbusters, does eating beans create more flatulence? Yeah. Well, they busted the one about putting food on the floor. Actually, they found that if it's a hard item like a cracker or a potato chip, something that's hard, you actually pick it up and there's virtually none of the microbes from the floor on it. But if it's something much softer like a cooked piece of pasta or maybe a piece of lettuce, that would absorb immense amounts of microbes within 5 seconds. And I had always heard it was a 7-second rule. I guess I'm slow. The world has gotten faster on me. That myth was busted. The one about eye black, see, sometimes the myths are busted. Sometimes they're marked as plausible, and sometimes they're confirmed. This one was plausible. They couldn't actually confirm it, but they said it's probably plausible. The one on driving a car with the windows down was confirmed. They took 2 identical SUVs. They drained all the gas. They put 5 gallons of gas in each one. They took the SUVs on a track, on an oval track, and they drove them with the cruise control on, so it was exactly the same speed. The one with the windows down went 15 miles further than the one with the air conditioner on. So folks, when you're going home today, okay, we aren't going to do that, are we? No. And the one about eating beans increases, I don't even want to tell you, I don't even want to think about how they tested that. But they confirmed it, and we're going to move right on. Because you see, our sermon series is not about the Mythbusters TV series mostly. No, we are looking at biblical Mythbusters. We want to know what are the biblical things that we all know that maybe we should look at a little more analytically. What would some of those biblical Mythbusters be? What would be some of the things we should look at? Well, maybe we should look at something we all know. Women are treated like second-class citizens in the Bible. That would be a myth we could take a look at. And in fact, we will in a little while. Or how about Jesus completely healed people? Oh, we all believe that. Let's take a look at that one. Or missionaries and missions are really kind of out of date in today's society. Or the Christian life is filled with joy. Oh, that's going to be our peace for today. The Christian life is filled with joy. We all know that. But then we look around at the stuff that happens in our lives. We lose our jobs. We lose a relationship. We lose a grade in a class. We lose moving ahead with a grade in the class. And we start asking ourselves, the Christian life is filled with joy, isn't it? We get into situations of pain and difficulty. Let's explore this a bit with a sermon of a friend of mine, a story of a friend of mine, Cease Murphy. Cease Murphy was a pastor in Atlanta. He also was a writer, and I got to know Cease. This is 30 years ago maybe, I was teaching at Andrews University, teaching writing, and he was a writer, and I invited him to come and help teach a Christian writer's workshop with me. In the intervening years, he has stopped pastoring and become a full-time writer. I've stopped being a full-time writer and become a full-time pastor. It's been a fascinating transition, but we have remained friends across these 30 years. You may know Cease Murphy without knowing who he is. If you're familiar with the book 90 Minutes in Heaven, Cease Murphy wrote that. Now, it's a story of Don Piper, and it's an autobiographical story, but Cease Murphy ghost wrote it for him. You may have heard of Sean Alexander, National Football League All-Star. Cease Murphy ghost wrote his autobiography. You may have heard of Dr. Jan Kuzma. He's a Seventh-day Adventist epidemiologist, and he looked at why Seventh-day Adventists tend to live 10 years longer than everybody else, and Cease Murphy helped ghostwrite that book. You may know Ben Carson. Do you remember the book Gifted Hands? It was quite a bestseller. Cease Murphy ghostwrote that. And they did a second book together, Thinking Big. Ben Carson tells the story. Ben Carson comes up with the ideas, but Cease Murphy puts the words on paper. And he's had a wonderful life, a great career out of that. And I always thought of Cease as a guy who had had a life filled with joy. The Christian life is filled with joy. And Cease Murphy, I thought, had a life filled with joy. And then, maybe a decade after I met him, he had an epiphany moment where he realized that he'd been abused as a child. He had repressed the memory totally. And one day he's out jogging, and the memory comes back to him. It floods into his life, and he starts crying as he is jogging. He spent a decade coming to grips with what that meant in his life. It was a life filled with more pain than joy for that decade. Just recently, a couple of years ago, his wife Shirley was diagnosed with a very difficult disease. And across the last 2 years, it's been very debilitating. And his wife of 58 years died last month. And Cease was asked, how do you relate to this? What's in there? And he said, the pain of loss is deep, but the peace of God is deeper. Maybe that's how we can begin to understand that the Christian life might be filled with joy. You've got a connection card in your bulletin. I want you to take it out. Take it out, and on the back side of it, it says My Next Steps, and on the back side of it is what we have for some notes for this sermon as well. That first spot there, it's going to be filled in. There's a couple of blanks to fill in. The pain is great, but the peace is greater. It is a way of understanding how our lives as Christians, which have difficulty, trouble, and trial in them, could be filled with peace and might just be filled with joy. Is that message busted or not? Now, I don't want you to answer that too soon. Let's leave the question mark up there because folks, as we look at biblical mythbusters, I want us to be certain that we are looking at the myths biblically, not just in the experience of people around us, but look at those myths biblically. And to do that, let's take a look at the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians has this fascinating piece. Do you remember the phrase that the Apostle Paul had a thorn in the flesh? This is where it comes from. 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10. Verse 7, therefore, in order to keep me from being conceited, I was given a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. The thorn in the flesh, the pain, the difficulty, the trouble. Oh, and then going on, verse 9, but he, that's the Lord, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses so that Christ's power may rest on me. And then verse 10, that is why for Christ's sake I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I have to tell you that I don't delight in difficulties. If the road were really smooth, I would feel a lot better about life. If the way were really easy, I would rejoice more often. But somehow that's not the reality of life. The Apostle Paul in the chapter before it lists some of the challenges in his life. He says, I've been beaten with rods. I've been in prison. I've been stoned. I was shipwrecked, spent a night and a day in the deep. I've been robbed, and then I have faced perils from heathens and I have faced perils from Christians. Hunger, thirst, and cold. Even the thing that might bring the most joy, caring for the churches he had started, the churches he had planted, he listed as one of the things that were difficulties to him. So we look at this and we may see that the pain is great, but the peace is greater. Yeah, Paul expresses it in Philippians 3 another way. I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing my Lord Jesus, of Jesus Christ my Lord. Yeah. We should look at some other Bible characters as well. There is David. David is anointed king. And almost the first thing that happens to him is that he is persecuted by King Saul. He has to flee and live in caves in the barren deserts of southern Israel. Then he ends up living with the Philistines, the heathen around him, because it's not safe to live in Israel, not safe to live in God's nation. He's been anointed to be the king of Israel. And his life seems to be filled with trouble and difficulty. We could look at Abraham. This happens to be the actor who plays Abraham in the movie The Bible. We could look at Abraham and his life. Abraham's got a good life in Ur of the Chaldees. Friends, relatives, prosperity. He's got a good life going. And God says, why don't you leave Ur of the Chaldees and head over to a place you've never heard of before, Canaan. Go someplace totally different. Leave everything you know behind and go to a place where no one knows you and there may be quite a bit of trouble, but that's my purpose for your life. For out of you I want to make a great nation. Abraham's life has its plenty of share of troubles. Or we could look at the Apostle John, this Byzantine icon of John on the island of Patmos with a young scribe with him. And John, who is separated from, he's an old man at this point, thrown in jail, taken away from everyone who loves him and everyone he loves. And is the Christian life really filled with joy? How can we explain that? And I want you to take your connection card out, because there's a second spot there. The pain is great, but the purpose is greater. God had a purpose for John. Out on the island of Patmos, he had plenty of time to see a vision that turns into the great apocalyptic book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. Abraham, there is a purpose in his life, but Abraham can't create a nation in Ur of the Chaldees. He has to go to a place where he is alone. David needs to develop some humility. He needs to know some struggle to lead people who are struggling. You see, the pain is great, but the purpose is greater. Oh, when we say the Christian life is filled with joy, isn't it? We can say that myth has been busted. And maybe as well changed in another way. Let me illustrate that. This good-looking kid up here on the screen is my grandson. You do recognize the resemblance, don't you? The blonde hair. Yeah, I thought you'd recognize the blonde hair especially. You know that our son and daughter-in-law live in Chad in Africa, I believe. They work at Bury Adventist Hospital there. They are the leadership core for that hospital. Their son Zane has had several health struggles. I think you know those things. We've shared that with the congregation often. If you want to follow them, and I know many of you do, they blog fairly often. They put their messages up at www.missionarydoctors.blogspot.com, and you can follow that. About a month ago, this grandson of mine died. And that is the only technical term that's appropriate for it. Now, just in case you're in panic, this is a picture of him after his death. He's helping to build something there at the hospital compound. But he stopped breathing. He had a seizure. His eyes rolled back in his head. There was no discernible heartbeat. For multiple minutes, he was clinically dead. For multiple hours, he was comatose. He survived that. In fact, a day later, it was hard to discern that anything had changed. But he and especially the family that was there. Can you imagine this pain? Oh, the pain was great. But they feel confident, Olin and Danae do, that they are where God wants them to be. God's purpose for them is to be working in this mission field, this hospital in Africa. And so they find peace in purpose greater than pain. Have you found that same thing in your life? We can take a look at this and say the Christian life is filled with joy, isn't it? And when we say that myth is busted, we don't just want to talk about busting myths. When we are looking at biblical mythbusters, we want to do more than bust a myth. We want to improve our understanding of the myth. You see, the Christian life is filled with joy. The Christian life is filled with joy. But we have to understand that that joy is not the kind of joy you have in going to King's Dominion and riding the Intimidator roller coaster. This is great. I was scared to death. I thought my eyeballs were going to fall out. This is not the kind of joy that comes when the boss gives you a commendation. This is not the kind of joy that comes when you get a big bowl of Rocky Road ice cream. And you all are here going, there's going to be a fellowship dinner here today. And he's talking ice cream. And it's getting close to 1 o'clock and I'm starving. Yeah, so am I. So that's why it comes to mind. No, this kind of joy, the Christian life is filled with a joy that is not dependent on external circumstances. It is joy that comes because there is peace and purpose in our lives. And often, the peace in our lives comes only because we know we are fulfilling God's purpose for us. There is the myth truly developed. It's not that there is no pain in the Christian life. It is that there is a joy that comes from within us based on the purpose and the peace in our lives. And there is your story. There is our biblical Mythbuster message for today. I'd like to take it to one application as well. We've chosen as a church here at Beltsville to plant a new church. And that's become one of our purposes. Now, we are not going to stop supporting our church school. We're not going to stop supporting Pathfinders and Adventures and all the other wonderful things that we do for the children of the church, including baby dedications. Ethan is a cutie, and there was nothing up here he was not ready to play with. We're not giving up on that. And by the way, we have started a community ministry. We're not slowing that down at all either. Our community ministry is blessing the city of Beltsville, or the area of Beltsville. We had a miracle happen with that this week. We got a building permit so that we can make the house handicap accessible. Now, you may not think that's a miracle. We took years to get the building permit when our school was going to build an addition. We took years to get the simple building permit for the sign out front. We took a week. That's all it took was a week to get a building permit for our house. We're not going to give up on that ministry. But we are going to start a new ministry, starting a new church. And here is my question for you. Will planting a new church bring some pain? And I think the answer to that is pretty clear. You see, if you choose to be part of that new church, you leave behind all the comfortable things we know here at the Beltsville Church. You go to places that are uncomfortable. I was talking with a guy this week, and he said the goal at a new church where people are coming who don't know for sure what's there is like the goal on a first date. Make it as least uncomfortable as possible. There'll be some pain there. If you stay here at Beltsville, some of the folks that you know, that you love, that are your great friends, may be gone at that other church. There will be some pain involved in creating a new church. But there will be as well a sense that you are following God's purpose for you. And there will be a sense of peace that comes from that. Starting a new church. And that means I want you to get out your connection card again. Get out this connection card. On the back, the last item under My Next Step says, I would like to stay up to date about our church's project to start a new church. Please add me to the email list. You can put a check mark there. Make certain that you put in an email address and maybe a phone number on the front, and your name would be nice as well, so that you can keep up to date with that. There are other things in this card to fill out as well, and the deacons are going to come up during our closing song and pick up the card, so I want to encourage you to fill this out. And if you're not sure about exactly what you want to do with this, you could come tonight We've got a meeting tonight at 7 o'clock here at the church over in the fellowship hall. And you can come at 7 o'clock tonight, learn more about what's happening with our church planting project. It will be one of the ways in which you can look at whether or not this is God's purpose in your life to bring peace in your life that overwhelms the pain in your life. Yeah. So we've started our series on Mythbusters. But our series is really not about Adam and Jamie and blowing up rockets and cutting cars in half and all the other things they do. Our series is about looking at biblical myths, all the things we know. And we don't plan to blow them up. We plan to improve our understanding of God, give ourselves totally new reasons to love and honor Jesus in our lives. Today we've learned that the Christian life can be filled with joy, not because there's no pain, no difficulty, no trouble in it, but in fact, because there is a purpose given from God in our lives, meaning in our lives, because God has given us meaning, and peace in our lives, because being within God's will is the only true way to find peace. The joy in the Christian life is not dependent upon all the fun things outside of us that interact with us. The joy in the Christian life is dependent upon Jesus in us, giving us purpose and peace. I hope that you will know those things in just this coming week, that it will become a reality in your life. Our closing hymn today fits with this. Until then, my heart will go on singing. It talks about some of the difficulty of this life. Come on up, Lucy, and lead us in this song. And as we stand to sing this song, the deacons are going to come and bring the offering plate. Pass your connection cards into the middle, if you would, and our deacons will collect them. As we sing this closing hymn, number 632, please stand up as we sing Until Then.